Hey guys, welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about that very important time period that's within 24 to 48 hours after you launch a new Google Ads campaign. So depending on the size of the campaign or account that you're launching, you may want to be checking in with the activity post-launch within those first few hours, just because you may start accumulating a lot of impressions and clicks. Again, it just depends on the nature of the account, how much money you're investing. In this particular exercise, we're working with a relatively smaller account. I think it's probably going to be a more common scenario for some more small business advertisers. But we'll go through some fundamental practices that I like to look at and some certain settings that I like to put in place with different points of data or metrics that I like to see, and just some things that I look for, and which we'll start to get into in other videos that discuss addressing poor quality score and other things to troubleshoot. So to get in, we launched the new campaign for Bear Claw Bicycle Company. You can see here it's gotten some activity throughout the day. Spent $44. Most of that's gone towards one campaign in particular, and that's for the Thunderhawk, which has several different ad groups speaking to the different features or types of bike that it actually is. We do have a branded ad group and another one for Frank, which is a different type of bike. But we'll be focusing mainly on the Thunderhawk campaign, which has seen most of the activity so far. One thing I want to point out right off the bat is Google has this feature here under recommendations that you can click into and see your optimization score, which currently is in beta, but I think that'll probably stick around. It's kind of a cool metric that helps you kind of assess, where you're at and improvements that you can make, in which they give you suggestions here. Mainly the suggestions right now are around redundant keyword use. It's seeing road adventure bike and adventure road bike as redundant. And then we have that TI, which is an abbreviation of titanium, TI fat bike. It's seeing the usage of titanium there and phrase match to be redundant. So we can clean that up. I personally am going to keep it that way, mostly because Google is really overhauling its match types. Even throughout this course, about halfway through creating it, Google had changed its criteria for how it defines exact match. And in short, exact match is not quite as exact as we want. In fact, it's kind of loosening the definition of an exact keyword. So an example might be adventure road bike. Well, Google might show our ads for a search query like adventure road bicycle. Even though that's still an exact match, Google sees it as pretty synonymous. So that's sort of an example of how it's kind of loosening the criteria for exact match. So just some things to keep in mind. Recommendations can show you some glaring weaknesses or opportunities that you can seize rather quickly. So take a glance at that. I'm going to be showing you some other more specific stuff here. So we did adjust some of the budgets prior to the previous videos when we had our budget set to $20 a day for each of these. We didn't launch Balthazar yet, but because Thunderhawk is kind of the flagship bike, we put a little bit more of our daily budget into that campaign, which you see here is performing the most or getting the most activity. We see it's got a decent click-through rate. I'd like to see it a little bit higher, but we can take a look at some reasons why it might not be performing as well as we hope. But again, it's very early on. This is pretty much within 24 hours of launching. So if we dive into the Thunderhawk campaign, see most of the ad groups here are most of the activities going through the All Road Road Plus ad group, and then we're getting actually a lot of activity, much to my surprise, in this adventure bike packing, which I thought would be a little less popular, but all performing somewhat consistent. Obviously that one's getting more activity, but the click-through rates are fairly the same, as well as the cost per click, a little higher on this one. Again, we're just using a manual CPC bidding strategy right now, just loosely setting these around $2, just because most of the suggested bid prices for that top level or top line ad placement was right around $2 or just under. So we're just starting things off there, but I'll show you some techniques here in a second on how we can sort of optimize that. So let's click into this ad group. And the first thing I want to have you kind of look over is just to see if you have any signs of poor quality keywords or a low quality score. And you'll usually get a message right in here if you do have this going on. In fact, I think there was an ad group. If we click in the campaign view, see all the ad group keywords. Yeah, so some of the keywords here are showing a low quality score under the status. This one's got a 2 out of 10 as well as that one. And this one could be just because it's not getting quite enough activity yet. Sometimes it's a little early to be immediately discounting a keyword because of low quality score, even though it hasn't really gotten much impressions yet. But let's go back to our All Road Plus ad group. And the first thing I want to make note of is just how you have your columns set up. So we don't have this data coming in yet because, again, it's a little too early. This might be more in that 48-hour period where you'll see data here for the first page bid estimate, or excuse me, first position bid estimate, and then the estimated top of page bid. So we want to be right in between these two figures. So if this was $1 to get to the top of page bid, which is right above the organic search results or the local 3-pack, if that was around $1, and then the top of first page or first position, meaning that top ad placement, which is usually it costs you a little bit more of a premium to be number one. Let's say that was $2. We just want to make sure that our CPC is set somewhere in between that $1 and $2 range. Again, that's just an example. It's probably going to look something more like $1.83 versus $3.50, and those will change. It's a very dynamic process with active advertisers who are also changing their bids or using a certain bidding strategy that might influence this over time. So keep that in mind. But to get these to show, I'll show you here in a second, but a couple other things that you might find handy aside from kind of the basics around impressions, CTR clicks, your average cost per click, is just making sure you have your conversions showing cost per conversion. I particularly like to use as a metric. Phone calls if it's relevant. And then these three at the end are sort of ways that I assess performance, especially right off the bat, and that's ad relevance. Right now, ad relevance is looking pretty good for this ad group. Quality score could be higher, but again, it's a little bit early to tell. And then average ad position for each keyword. So most of these are showing around the 1 to 2 ad placement, which is where we want to be. I don't think Google is showing 3 or 4 ads for most of these types of keywords. I'll show you a tool here in a sec, or it'll actually be in a future video where we can actually see exactly where these are showing without actually having to search Google and getting an impression against us. So again, these are just some columns that I like to put into place right off the bat, just so I can clearly see how things are performing. And if some of these average positions were 3, 4, 5, then I would know I'm not bidding high enough, and that would usually be indicative of a very low click-through rate. In which case, this one's probably hovering between 1 and 2, maybe sometimes in the third ad placement. So it's getting a decent click-through rate, but that could be better if I was bidding a little higher. Now, with your CPC set at right now for $2, your average cost per click is not going to be quite that expensive. It's always going to be sort of a percentage of this metric, and that's just based on your quality score and what other advertisers are bidding at. You can delve into that formula on your own time. It can be kind of scientific. It's really not too complicated though, but just keep in mind, whatever you set your max CPC at, you're usually going to be just under that, maybe by like 70 to 80%. Obviously this one is way lower, but again, it's only seen 5 impressions. So to get these columns in place, right here under columns, I have my own custom one kind of organized, which you can do here with this checkbox to save your own column set, and you can name it. But for performance, you always want to have your basics. I think these are required for the most part, or maybe they're not. No, they are optional. It's only these that are required. But of course, you want to know your click-through rate, impressions over clicks, or vice versa. How much you're spending, and this one is usually not checked by default, but you want to make sure this is checked for average ad position. If we click into conversion, again, I just have primary conversions here and cost per conversion. If you're using different types of conversion tracking, you can make sure to have all conversions set. Attributes, again, there's that estimated top of page bid, an estimated first position bid. You can even have estimated first page bid. Oh, that used to be an option. There it is. But again, our primary objective here is to make sure we're in that top of page. So estimated first page doesn't really suffice for us. So I don't click that anymore. I used to, but I'm looking to get right in between these two. And of course, quality score here. There's ad relevance, quality score, and again, those are good to have checked to assess performance. And you can play with other columns here, but those are kind of the essentials that I recommend using, at least to begin. So right off the bat, I take a look at what our bids are set at and how things are performing. Again, it's a little early to tell, and we are using a very simple approach with the max CPC. This is a rather manual CPC bidding. It's a little bit more labor intensive. You have to sort of be on it with keeping track of how things are performing and making adjustments as you go. But it also enables you full control over where your ads are showing up and how much you're setting your max CPC at. So, knowing that this keyword here is showing up in the 1.8 range so far based on its 12 clicks or 345 impressions, we're still right up next to our max CPC. This is almost a keyword that I might bid a little higher on, but again, it's early to tell. We haven't gotten any conversions yet, so I'm going to hold off on making any drastic changes right now to the bids, just because I'd like to see a little bit more activity coming through. But one thing that you can do, and you can even do this before you launch, is to use different bid strategy types to sort of, I hate to use the word automate, but I guess it makes it a little bit easier to make sure that right off the bat your ads are showing in that top ad placement. So if we go under settings, and we're going to go into the campaign view for these settings so we can adjust the bidding. So right here under this link, change bid, and I'll give you this drop down arrow. Right now it's even suggesting I use enhanced CPC, which is a perfectly fine strategy. The thing with enhanced CPC is you need to be pulling in a lot more data and generating a lot more activity for Google to start to adjust your bids automatically based on how well keywords are performing, or converting rather. That's kind of the definition of enhanced CPC. What I like to do is either start with a manual CPC or start with a target search page location. And with target search page location, we can have this button here clicked for ensuring our ads show up at the top of the first results page. So that will ensure that we're above organic, above the 3-pack. And you can set that in place, again, before you launch. Sometimes that's a smart approach. If your clicks are extremely expensive, that might be a little bit more risky, especially if you have a limited budget. But if we change that with this new bidding type, we can just name it Thunderhawk Aggressive and save. I don't know if this is going to take effect because again we don't have those estimated top page bid metrics in place yet, but let's just take a look and see if anything had changed. Okay, so it's still at $2 right now, but with that new bid strategy in place, it'll probably be, when I wake up tomorrow morning and check in on this, these will all be the exact same number as this here, which isn't being generated quite yet. Again, is due to a lack of activity so far. But by doing that, we'll ensure that we're getting our ads where we want them to be, maximizing that click-through rate potential, and in turn, that's just going to help our quality score right out of the gate. And then over time, you can leave it at that, or you can go back and switch from that bid strategy type to an enhanced CPC model. You could also go with the maximized conversions, but again, these you're sort of compromising control for the sake of automation and having Google make adjustments over time to your CPC to help generate more conversions. So they're great strategies. Several of these can apply depending on what your goals are, but using this target search page location is a good approach right out of the gate. In this case, we're just using manual CPC, just keeping it kind of simple. Also, just being well aware of what the average bid price is for that top ad placement. In which case, it was right in between $1 and $2 across the board for most of the keywords that we're targeting. So that was pretty much indicative of our average ad positions with those keywords. So just checking in with the keyword bidding and how things are going is fundamental. Click-through rate is really poor on some of these keywords. That's usually because we're not bidding quite high enough. Surprisingly, this exact match for gravel bike is showing a pretty strong click-through rate, despite our max CPC being lower than what we're actually spending. That's probably because the daily budget for that, well, I guess that is the Thunderhawk campaign, but if, say, that wasn't Frank, that was not getting the daily allotted budget spent, Google's going to have some flexibility in how it allocates its funds towards what you have your daily budget set at. So it's not always going to be right on point with $40 a day. There's going to be some leeway, and if certain campaigns aren't spending their daily budget, you might see other campaigns that are more active seeing some of that spend being allocated towards them. So something to keep in mind. The other things I want to show you was just to check in with how your ads are performing. First thing is just to make sure you don't have any disapproved ads. Even though these are approved, you can see here that this ad isn't showing now. I think we're getting this message because we've reached our daily budget today. So, we have it set at $40, and I think this campaign has already spent something like $42 or $43. So that's why that's occurring. We can also use the ad preview and diagnosis tool to see, where these ads are showing up. If the third headline is showing up and the second description line is showing up. This is often, directly correlated to quality score and our max CPC and where that's set at. If we're not bidding high enough, sometimes these more rich features don't show, but we'll get into using that tool in a future video. But that's also something that you can use to sort of assess performance during that first 24 to 48 hour period. Let's see here. So I think the last portion I wanted to take you through in this video was using day parting, or down here ad schedule. So we're still in the Thunderhawk campaign view, and if we head back over here to the ad group, you can see that, yeah, so this is spent $42 already today, budget set at 40. So we've already gone through our budget. It's only 5:21 p.m. So We can either increase this if we have the budget available. The other alternative is to use ad scheduling. And with this here, we can sort of segment when our ad shows throughout the day. So if we wanted to, make sure our ad only shows up between, 6 a.m. and 9 p.m. and the other time periods, in the early and very late hours of the day. Typically sometimes that can be users who are just poking around and maybe they're not really interested in making a purchase. That can help ensure that our ads are shown for users who are a little bit more in market. So you can play with day parting just to sort of prioritize when your ads show up and just make a better use of your daily budget. So I'm not going to do anything with that yet. I think our approach is just going to be to jack up the budget a little bit, maybe up to like $60 a day or even 80, depending on if the funds are there. It's just something I'll have to check with the owner of this company. But yeah, using ad scheduling can be effective, and we're going to get into this in a future video. But also using bid adjustments based on device. That's actually here under device. So I may have alluded to this in previous videos. I know I'll mention again in upcoming videos, but the ad real estate on mobile is often far more valuable, or I guess the mobile ads at the top of the search results are, I think, to be a little bit more valuable real estate to occupy than on desktop. So a common scenario for me is to increase the bid adjustment for mobile devices. So this I might boost up to something like 30 or 40, just to ensure that our ads are showing in that 1 to 2 ad spot on mobile, because that ad placement or ad real estate is a little bit more limited, but it's a little bit more exclusive. Users pretty much have to see and scroll through those ads right away. They can't see the organic search results until they scroll down on their device. So using mobile bid adjustments can be effective as well. So that's the first 24 to 48 hours. I'm sorry we haven't generated quite enough activity to make this video as impactful as possible, but I think you guys get the gist. We'll cover some more PPC optimization and troubleshooting techniques in the future videos. So we'll see you then. Peace.